Ever since Copperhead Strike was announced, I have just been waiting for the day to ride this thing. I always thought it looked like a great ride. From the animation, I was kind of skeptical. Was it really going to be that good? I mean, 0 to 42, that doesn't sound that great. The layout kind of looked okay to me, and of course, I heard some weaker things about Icon, so I was a little worried, but I got to ride it this Saturday. I got 4 rides on it, 3 front row rides, and 1 second to back row ride, with one of those being a night ride. And let me just say, this thing was awesome. Copperhead Strike definitely did not disappoint, and I was really blown away by this thing. Now, before we get into the good stuff, I'm going to straight up go through the cons. This is the most unreliable coaster I've ever had to experience. Literally, it broke down like 5 or 6 times that day. In fact, it is so unreliable that I was one of the people who broke down with it. I got stuck on that freaking second launch for like, 15-20 minutes, so they had to relaunch it. It was kind of a cool experience. I did like it. It was pretty awesome. But still, that just shows how unreliable this thing is. It was the first day, so I'm not sure if that had something to do with it, but I really hope that's not something that's going to last for very long. The second con is this thing actually had a rattle. From the corkscrew to the airtime on the second launch, it actually had a noticeable rattle. Like, I really didn't care. It wasn't that big of a deal. It really was not that bad, guys. I didn't mind it at all, but I just thought it was so strange. Like, this is a brand new ride, and it had a rattle for like a good 15-20 seconds of the ride. That was kind of odd in my opinion, but not a big deal at all. Anyway, let's get into the ride experience. So with Copperhead Strike, when you walk into that plaza, it is just so cool. The new area looks so good. There's a set of flyers that are there with it. There's even this giant smokestack where there's fire coming out of it. It is really nice. So much great theming in this area, and I was just blown away. I loved it. Then you see the coaster. Copperhead Strike looks so nice. It is very appealing. They did a great job making it look good. And in the queue line, there is a lot of great theming. Like, I was shocked by how good the theming was with this thing. But of course, I had Fastlane Plus this day, so I didn't go in the actual queue line, so I didn't get to see the detailed theming. That would have been pretty cool, but I was not going to wait 2.5 hours for that, so I could get my 4 rides in. But anyway, you get into that station, and it is really sweet. This station is really smaller, but it is very nice. I do like the detail. There's even a Centurion oil sign, which I thought was kind of odd. They did trademark that name. I'm wondering if Cedar Fair is going to do something with that in the future. Maybe give a new coaster that name. I've always had the theory that they were going to make Vortex a floorless coaster and call it Centurion. So I'm not sure, but we'll have to see what happens with that in the future. Anyway, that was just a cool little detail I noticed. So you step in your trains, and this was my first Mack Multi-Launch. Just remember, my first major Mack coaster, so I loved these trains. I thought the restraints were really comfortable. I loved how the trains looked. These trains look so cool. They're like black trucks, and it's just so shiny and cool. I mean, the detail they did with this ride is amazing. So you start out your ride, you're going to go out, and before I tell you what you go into, you start to hear these really sketchy sounds. It's kind of like a Mystic Timbers type vibe where you're going up the lift hill and it's like, don't go in the shed, you know, that kind of weird thing. But this time, it was like some old country music static. It was really weird, and I'll let you guys know what that sounded like right here. So yeah, kind of a weird detail I noticed, but it was still really cool. If you're in the front row, you hear it really up close while you're going through that JoJo roll. And speaking of the JoJo roll, oh my gosh, this was incredible. Probably my 3rd or 4th favorite part of the ride, if not second. It was just so cool. Like, the ride hadn't even started, and I was loving it. You are just hanging so hard. You feel like you're going to fall out. You only have a lap bar. And so now when I go through Hydra's JoJo roll, I'm going to be really disappointed because this was just awesome. This JoJo roll is fantastic. You can ask anyone else that was there on Saturday and rode it, and I bet you they will say the same exact thing. You go into that barn, and there's theming everywhere. You kind of get into the story of Granny's moonshine or whatever. You look to the right, and there's this chicken that just starts exploding. Like, it was so weird. And then you look to the left, and on the projector screen, the granny is getting these guys, and then you start to hear the engine of the vehicle just rev up. You hear, like, it's about to accelerate, and you're like, oh gosh, here we go. And then the weak launch comes. Yeah, I knew this launch was not going to be that great, but it was actually better than I expected. I mean, people talked crap on these kind of things, and I was like, well, that was kind of good. For a first launch, it was actually really cool. Definitely didn't have too much force to it, but, you know, it was still kind of fun. Then you go into that first loop, and let me tell you, this first loop, the hang time is awesome. This is not the best hang time on the ride, speaking of the JoJo roll and one other specific element I will get to here in a little bit, but the hang time is still great, and this loop was really, really fun. I just love this thing so much, guys. Then you are going to go into the one element that surprised me the most on this ride, which is the first airtime hill. I was expecting a cool little pop of airtime, something pretty good, but I was blown away when I found out that was like something off of Twisted Timbers. It was crazy RMC style ejector. I'm not even lying. In the front row, it's even better. As the day went on, this thing heated up, and the airtime right there just got stronger and stronger. It was so cool. And then after this, you go into a corkscrew, and this is where the rattle starts to kick in. Nothing big, but it was still kind of weird how it already had a rattle, and this thing just opened. But it was a pretty good corkscrew. One of the weaker parts of the ride, in my opinion. Still really fun. And then you kind of sidewind into these turns where you definitely feel some force and go up into this part before the launched airtime sequence where you just jolt out of your seat. The airtime was crazy. I was like, holy crap, what are you doing, Copperhead? I was not expecting all this airtime everywhere. And then this is where you go into the unique airtime launch sequence. You go from 38 to 50, I believe, and 2 seconds or something. I can't remember, but you definitely hit a top speed of 50. It is a slower acceleration, but you definitely have a lot of fun on it because the laterals are cool, how you're kind of launching on this airtime hill. It wasn't as great as I was expecting, but I still liked it, and people said that you didn't get any airtime on that launch. No, they were lying. You actually kind of come out a little bit. It is definitely nothing much at all, but you come out a little bit, so it's kind of cool. And then you kind of go upwards where there's, again, no more airtime, and go into this awesome element, the top hat. You are just looking down over all the pedestrians. It is so cool. The hang time is amazing. I love this element so much. Such a great amount of hang time you got. It was not as good as the JoJo rolls hang time, but this was definitely my second favorite inversion on this entire ride. So awesome. I loved it. Then you're going to go into a really aggressive turn. This turn shocked me. It was really forceful, especially when I rode this thing at night in the front row. By the way, at night, this thing has headlights on when it's dark back there, so that was so cool. This ride has so many awesome features. But anyway, you're going to go into that really tight turn. It was pretty cool, actually. And this second loop is not as long-lasting as the first one, so you don't get as much hang time, but it's still pretty cool. I mean, every inversion on this ride was really good. Except for that corkscrew. I liked the corkscrew a lot, but it was the weakest inversion on that ride, in my opinion. Anyway, you're going to go into this stangle dive type element, which was so cool. In the back row, it whips you straight through it. In the front row, you kind of pop out of your seat, so it was awesome. So much airtime on this ride, remember. And then you're going to enter my favorite part of this whole ride. Oh my gosh, Intimidator 305 vibes straight off of this. It was this really sharp bank turn. You are just jerked to the left like so hard, and you're going through it so fast. I loved it. Ask anyone, and I know everyone there loved this element just like me. It was such a forceful element, and it whips you so hard. Definitely felt like something off of Intimidator 305, or even some of the guys there were telling me this was like something off of Maverick. So yeah, I'm looking forward to Maverick now. That was pretty cool. Definitely my favorite part of the ride, and just very, very whippy. You'll start going through some whips and turns, and I mean, all these whips and turns, you're getting some laterals, you're going up and down with these turns, you're going from right to left. It's so cool. Just this whole spaghetti bowl section, very, very cool. Definitely one of the weaker parts of the ride, but remember, a lot of the weakest parts of this ride are still really good, which is something I found interesting about Copperhead Strike. There's really not a bad part of this ride. Everything is just so much fun, and that's something kind of like Lightning Rod, except with Lightning Rod, the weakest part of the ride is better than like 90% of all roller coaster elements, which is something I found interesting. But anyway, with Copperhead Strike, yeah, the spaghetti bowl section was cool. And then you end off the ride with a bang, which was what I was shocked. That little pop of airtime at the end, I was expecting nothing because it was smaller than Fahrenheit, which gave absolutely nothing. So I got jolted out of my seat. I was like, what was that? And then you just pop into the brakes, which kind of slides you back into the station. And they were running 3 trains on this bad boy, so that was really good. They were doing great with dispatches. The crew was so nice. They were so cool. I just love the vibe this freaking thing gave off. Overall, this ride is really, really great. It was definitely more aggressive than I thought it would be. Very, very smooth, except for the corkscrew to the second launch. I mean, it was just kind of a interesting vibrating rattle. It was not a big deal, but it was just something odd I noticed. I think a lot of people agreed with me there, so Definitely kind of sad for Copperhead, even though it just opened, but it was definitely not a big deal at all because this ride was so much fun, so much variety. It packed so many elements into one ride, and I loved the whole thing. This ride is definitely not meant for the launches, so do not expect much from them, but I gotta admit, the second launch gave off some cool laterals and a cool vibe, so definitely very, very interesting. And the inversions gave great hang time. This thing has some crazy RMC type ejector, and it is all over the place. So you'll be surprised where this thing gives you airtime. It's actually all over the place. So overall, Copperhead Strike was an amazing ride. I was shocked by how good it was. Everyone said, oh, it's going to be like a family-style Mack, or oh, it's going to be a disappointment like Icon was. Now, I do know a lot of people who said Icon was not a disappointment and that they really loved it. So I did like this thing a lot. Copperhead Strike is definitely one of my favorite coasters now, so I'm really looking forward to Icon. I highly doubt Icon will be as good, but it'll definitely be a really cool ride as well if I liked this. So now what's going to happen is I'm really looking forward to Helix. This is really high on my bucket list now. From what Copperhead gave me a taste of, Helix is just a much larger and badder version of that. Like, wow, that thing is huge, and the airtime moments are just bigger and stronger, I've heard. And then just going up from there, you have Flash, you have DC Rivals, like those big ones. Holy crap, Mack Rides. I just need to get on all of these. Mack Rides is now one of my favorite manufacturers just because of Copperhead Strike. This thing was so cool. It had the smoothness, except for the corkscrew to the second launch. It had the aggressiveness, pretty intense for a Mack apparently, and I can definitely confirm that. The inversions gave great hang time. Airtime was amazing, and it's an overall well-rounded ride. So for Copperhead Strike's final score, I'm going to be giving it an 8.5 out of 10. This ride is great. The only cons are it is extremely, and I mean extremely unreliable. They shut this thing down so much. I got stuck on it for 20 minutes at the second launch, so it was cool. I just kind of whipped my phone out and played it for a little while, so no big deal. But the other thing is it does have a pretty noticeable rattle from the corkscrew to the second launch, so it is still a fantastic ride, and I can't make it go a very much higher score because it is just, you know, not that extreme of a ride. It is still great. I loved it. So this is my Copperhead Strike review. I really encourage you guys to go out there and ride this thing at least sometime in this year. I'm glad I got to ride it on opening day. I rode it 4 times. The night ride was awesome. That was so good. It was very aggressive there. And the headlights, wow, that was so cool. We got front row for that, so very awesome. And just get out there, guys. This is my second favorite coaster at Carowinds now. Definitely Rams, Intimidator, and Afterburns. So, and a lot of people are calling this thing better than Fury. I kind of disagree, but I'd rather a marathon this thing than Fury. I will say that. Fury just has that force to it, you know. But overall, this was a more fun and well-rounded ride. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Post your comments down in the section below. If you rode Copperhead Strike, what did you think of it? I thought this thing was awesome. Just thinking about it, I want to go back there and ride it now. One of my favorites to this day. Until next time, coaster fans, I will see you later.